phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
What it do, YouTube? B. Kelly back again with another banger video. In today's video, y'all, I'm going to be talking about what happened to the past 10 #1 JUCO players coming out of JUCO from the 2011 to 2020 recruiting class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings. Coming out of the 2011 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation was Cornelius Carradine, defensive end who was committed to Florida State out of Butler Community College. In Carradine's 2 seasons at Florida State, he played very well, even going off in his senior season where he had 80 total tackles and 11 sacks. But his 2 years at Florida State, his stats included 118 total tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 16.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. And in the 2013 NFL Draft, he was taken by the San Francisco 49ers in the 2nd round. In the 4 seasons he spent in San Francisco, he was primarily a backup, and he only started in 8 of the 44 games he played in while he was in San Francisco. His career numbers as a 49er, he had 80 total tackles and 5.5 sacks. Carradine would spend 2 more seasons in the NFL after being done as a 49er. He would only play 1 game in 2018 with the Oakland Raiders and 1 game in 2019 with Miami, and since 2019, he's been out of the NFL. In the 2012 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO recruit in the nation was wide receiver Cordarrelle Patterson, who was committed to Tennessee. Patterson would only spend 1 season at Tennessee in the 2012 college football season, where he had 778 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, and on the ground he had 308 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And that's not even mentioning what he did in the kick and punt return game. After an impressive junior campaign at Tennessee, Patterson would declare for the 2013 NFL Draft, where he was taken in the 1st round, 29th overall pick by the Minnesota Vikings. Patterson so far has spent 8 seasons in the NFL. 4 with the Vikings, 2 with the Bears, 1 with the Patriots, and 1 with the Raiders. Now, I will say this. His career numbers as a receiver are not the most impressive things ever, as he only has 2,087 career receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, and most of that is coming in his time in Minnesota. But something that you can't ignore is how good of a kick returner he is. He is honestly probably one of the best, if not the best, kick returner in the NFL right now, and he's been that way these past few seasons. He's made 4 Pro Bowls as a kick returner, and he's made 4 All-Pro teams as a kick returner as well. In the 2013 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation came out of Northeast Mississippi Community College. He was a defensive tackle who was committed to Ole Miss, and that was Lavon Hooks. Lavon Hooks at Ole Miss, the 2 seasons he was there, he would have some injury-riddled seasons in both seasons, as he only played in a total of 15 games in his career as a Rebel. Now, his numbers included 27 total tackles, 9 for loss, and 3 sacks. Hooks would end up going undrafted in the 2015 NFL Draft. Although Hooks would go undrafted, he would be on a team for a little bit of time, as he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers from 2016 to 2019, primarily as a practice squad member. In the 2014 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation was wide receiver Tequila Williams, coming out of Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, who was committed to Auburn. Tequila Williams had a huge first season at Auburn, as in 10 games in the 2014 college football season, he had 730 receiving yards, averaging 16 yards per reception, and 5 touchdowns. But in his final year in Auburn in the 2015 college football season as a senior, he would only appear in 5 games where he had 147 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. Now, the only reason why he only played 5 games was that he was actually dismissed from the team due to violating team rules. Williams' pro football career so far has been going undrafted in the 2016 NFL Draft, then getting picked up by the LA Rams, then getting cut as part of the final roster cuts by the Rams, then spending a couple seasons in Canada in the Canadian Football League with the Edmonton Eskimos and being one of the best receivers in that league, and then in 2019 getting picked up by the Buffalo Bills on short notice, where for that season he actually had 6 catches for 108 yards in 1 game where they lost 13-6. And in the 2020 NFL season, He was a part of final roster cuts yet again for the Buffalo Bills, but this time he was on their practice squad the full season, and recently he signed a reserve/futures contract with the Bills. In the 2015 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO recruit in the nation was out of Georgia Military College, and this was running back Jovan Robinson, who was committed to Auburn. Jovan Robinson in the 2015 college football season would have a really good season, only appearing in 8 games and being a backup running back. In those 8 games, he rushed for 639 yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry and 3 touchdowns. And going into the 2016 season, he was expected to be the main back for Auburn, but then out of the blue, he was dismissed from the team, and it really was never said why he was dismissed. In the 2016 college football season, he would spend his final year of college eligibility at Valdosta State, but it really seems like he never got any NFL attention after that, as he was never actually offered an NFL contract. In the 2016 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation was Jonathan Kongbo, defensive end who was committed to Tennessee. Kongbo would play 3 seasons at Tennessee, where he had 51 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and 2 interceptions, including 1 interception that he took all the way to the house for a touchdown. But in his senior season in 2018, he tore his ACL 6 games into the season, which really hurt his draft stock. Kongbo would end up going undrafted in the 2019 NFL draft, but he was drafted in the Canadian Football League draft with the 5th overall selection. In his rookie season in the CFL, when he was playing very good, but the problem was he was injured about half the time. Shortly after the Canadian Football League season ended, he would sign with the San Francisco 49ers, but right before the 2020 NFL season started, he would end up getting hurt, then waived. In the 2017 recruiting class, the #1 player in the nation coming out of JUCO was quarterback Jarrett Stidham, who was committed to Auburn. In Stidham's 2 seasons at Auburn, he completed 64% of his passes while throwing for 5,952 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Stidham would end up getting drafted in the 4th round of the 2019 NFL Draft by the New England Patriots. So far in the 2 seasons that Jarrett Stidham has spent in New England, he has been a backup quarterback, and he has played in 8 games during his career where he's completed 50% of his passes, has thrown for 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. In the 2018 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO recruit coming out of that class was Antoine Jackson Jr., defensive tackle who was committed to Ohio State. In 2 seasons at Ohio State so far, Antoine Jackson has played in 11 games, making 24 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. He is expected to return to the Buckeyes for the 2021 college football season with the extra year of eligibility that everyone is receiving. In the 2019 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation was Jermaine Johnson out of Independence Community College, who was committed to Georgia. In Jermaine Johnson's 2-year career at Georgia so far, he has been primarily a backup linebacker for them, as he has 36 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 2 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. But going into the 2021 college football season, he is now going to play for Florida State. Coming out of the 2020 recruiting class, the #1 JUCO player in the nation was Perrion Winfrey, defensive tackle who was committed to Oklahoma. Perrion Winfrey in his first season at Oklahoma in the 2020 college football season had 19 total tackles, 5.5 for loss, half a sack, and 3 pass deflections, and was a very huge contributor on this Oklahoma defense that has been improving steadily each season under Coach Grinch. And going into the 2021 college football season, he's expected to have a breakout season and be one of the better defensive tackles in all of college football, and be one of the higher defensive tackles going into the 2022 NFL Draft. Well guys, now that I'm at the end of the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly out.